and that's this. And it's really about the new series of Doctor Who. Basically, has Russell T asked you to write for the new series? And if he hasn't, would you like a few of us to nip over to his place and wrap them up a bit for you?
Oh, have you seen Russell? He's about 9 feet tall. I wouldn't advise it. No, the thing is, you see, I've had my go.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, what's nice is that all the people making the show, I think, without exception, you know, grew up reading my target novelisations, you know, and lots of the writers, I would say pretty well all of the writers have told me so, you know, at some time when I've met them, you know. As, you know, people might hear say, oh, I used to read the target books when I was little, you see. And all the current generation of Who people grew up reading my target books at their mother's knee, as it were, you see, or seeing, you know, the Pertwee and the Tom Baker shows, you know. And, you know, I've had my go, you know, I mean, and they don't want me to do it, they want to do it, you know. I mean, in the days when Barry and I were doing it, the sort of name from the past was Verity Lambert, who'd started it, you see, and Verity was still around. But we would have died rather than go and ask Verity for help, you know, we were going to do it. Even if we were going to screw it up, we were going to screw it up ourselves, you know. And they feel, you know, quite rightly, you know, that they're going to do it. Yeah. And I'm treated with great kindness, you know, and great respect, you know, which is very flattering. I mean, they asked, when they premiered the whole of the New Who, you know, the first of the Christopher Eccleston, Barry and I were asked to the premiere, you know, sent up to Cardiff at the BBC's expense and a room in a nice hotel, and went to the premiere and introduced to Russell and all the stars and things, you know, and as I say, treated with great kindness and affection, you know, so that's all, you know, that's more than I could expect, all I could ask. And still, you know, as I say, these odd jobs sort of crop up, you see. I mean, I was asked to do the Quick Read series, Made of Steel, which is, you know, a shortish book, and that was sort of reminiscent of the novelisations. It's about 80 pages, you know, and the novelisations were 100, but it had very much the same sort of feel to it. And then the Sarah Jane thing, which was an actual novelisation, and then, much to my surprise, a second quick read. Revenge of the Judoon, which I have just finished and delivered, you know, and has apparently passed the scrutiny and approval of Cardiff. Everything has to be approved by Cardiff, the authority. So that's, you know, I mean, I feel, and the other thing that's going on, which is very nice, is that now, having put everything out on video, they're now putting everything out on DVD. And with the DVD, they have these commentaries. I mean, I don't know if anybody's got a DVD with commentaries on, you know. I was amazed when they first said that. I said, who wants to watch a Doctor Who with me rabbiting on through the entire length of it? It'd be like being in the cinema where the bloke behind you won't shut up. And they gave me a pitying look and said, they can turn it off, Terrance. They don't have to listen. So I said, well, that explains it. And I've just done 2 of those with Barry Letts, Katie Manning, and some of the actors. Planet of the Daleks and Frontier in Space. You know, I've just done 2 commentaries for those. I'm doing an interview for a documentary for a DVD on this coming Friday. You know, so all those little odds and sods and jobs keep cropping up. You know, so the connection's still there, which is nice.
Could I just open it up to the floor, and has anyone got any questions for Terrance?
You said they'd all sit down, didn't you?
And they all said to me favorably, they said, oh yeah, we've had loads and loads of questions.
Don't be shy, anybody, yes sir.
Can you tell us about the 5 Doctors, please, Terrance? One of my favourite Doctor Who stories.
Ah, yeah, the 5 Doctors was great fun. First I heard, this was in, well, I haven't spoken about, you know, but the Americans eventually fell for Doctor Who, more in the Tom Baker days, and they had these big conventions. So another fringe benefit I got is that every now and again, somebody would ring up and say, we're having a convention in Los Angeles, or New York, or San Francisco, or New Orleans, would you care to come? And I'd say, yes, all right then, you know. So every now and again I got a trip to America. and, you know, made a great fuss of us in America because they're very, you know, they're crazy enthusiastic. They all dress up as the characters in America. Nobody is wearing a single Doctor Who costume. And I was at a convention in New Orleans, and the phone, and I'd been to a party, you know, a kind of party for the convention the night before, and they'd given me a minder who was this sort of very large American southerner to sort of look after me. So I was wandering around chatting to people, drinking from cans of cold beer, and every time I emptied my can, this huge hand would come, take away the empty can, replace it with a full can, and I go on talking. Now this is not a particularly safe way to go around drinking. So I went to bed very late, you know, and the phone rang in the small hours of the morning, and this voice, sort of distant voice said, "Hello, is that Terrance? This is Eric." And I said, "Eric who? I don't know anybody called Eric, you know, and I'm asleep anyway." And it was Eric Saywood, who then script editor of Doctor Who, and said, I'm just ringing to say we'd like you to write the anniversary show. Would you be interested? And I said, "Oh, right, yes, fine, Eric, you know." And we worked in the same building, you see. So I was then script editing the classic serial, and Eric was doing Doctor Who in the floor below, you know, so it was easy enough. And I said, "I'll come and see you when I get back to work on Monday," which I did. And he was then a bit shifty. And I said, "Now, what's all this about?" And he said, "Well," he said, "it's a bit difficult, Terrance," he said. We've asked... originally we asked Bob Holmes to do it. You know, Bob is, in my view, the best Doctor Who writer. You know, he wrote the Auton Invasion. You know, the Spearhead from Space. You know, the first Pertwee story, and lots of wonderful things afterwards. Caves of Androzani and Deadly Assassin. You know, he's absolutely my favourite Who writer. And anyway, Bob could be a bit difficult. He was a big, strong chap, an ex-soldier and an ex-policeman, and, you know, quite a formidable sort of character. And he never particularly liked Nathan Turner or I think Eric very much. And anyway, they said, "We've asked Bob to do it, but we're having a lot of trouble with him, you know, and he's not, and he's had a row with Jon, and we're not very happy the way things are going." And Eric said, "So what we thought we'd do is this. Bob is writing a storyline, and we thought we'd ask you to write a storyline, and then we decide which one we like best." And I was outraged, and I said, "Certainly not," I said. And I said, "Look, if you want Bob to do it, go with Bob, because you couldn't do better. Yeah. If Bob's not going to do it, you can ask me, and I'll be happy to do it, but make your mind up, you know, and tell me when you've got it sorted out." And weeks later, Eric phoned up even more shamefaced and said, "Look, Bob's had another row and walked out, will you do it?" And there was only about half the normal time available by then, you know, so it had to be done in a great rush. And also, I could never quite get out of them who was going to be in it and who wasn't. I mean, the big crisis was, I wrote a story in which the villain turned out to be the Master at the end, and a storyline. And Eric said, "Well, it's a good story," he said, "but look, if when the end we get to who's the villain and it's the Master," he said, "this is not going to be a huge surprise to anybody." And I thought, yes, he's quite right. So I did another storyline in which Barusa, who's the archetypical good guy, turns out to be the villain, you see. And that all worked out quite nicely. They accepted that. Well, they pretty well had to then, because they were getting desperate, you know. And wrote it all at a great rate. Wrote a first draft. Eric phoned up to say, "How's it going?" And I said, "Oh, pretty well, Eric. I finished the first draft." And there was a sort of silence, and he said, "Oh my God." And I said, "That wasn't quite the reaction I was hoping for, you know." And he said, "Tom's not going to do it," you see. And at that time, I'd been writing for Tom to be in it, you see. And excuse me, although I say it myself, I am at my best in a crisis, because I am extremely lazy, but if things get desperate, you know, I can sort of pull my finger out and get to work. And it hardly threw me at all. I said, "Okay, right, Tom's not..." I said, "Have you got anything can I have anything with Tom in it? Otherwise we can't really call it the Five Doctors, And he said, well, there's a couple of bits of a show called Sharda, which got cancelled because of a strike. And I said, can you find me a bit where he can be picked up by by the mysterious triangle, and later on a point where he can be released, he can be freed. And Eric said, yes, I think we've got that material. And Tom says we can use it. And I said, right, in that case I'll trap the bugger in a time warp, and that will dispose of him for the story. And I then did that and sat down and rewrote it. And in the weird way, you see, that things happen, it actually improved the story. Because originally Tom was going to be the one who stole the Master's device and went back to Gallifrey and got tempted by Barusa. Because I always felt that if anybody could be tempted by the dark side, it would be Tom. Obviously not going to be Peter, who plays cricket and is too much a decent English gentleman, But the thing is that it gave Peter prominence, which is quite right, because he was the Doctor at the time, which was very nice. And I love the scene in the pump, which I think is one of the best scenes in the piece, although it was actually written by somebody else for a completely different show. But it fits in, as if it had been planned from the beginning, I think. It's absolutely lovely, that bit with Tom and Roman. Still ought to have been called the 4.5 Doctors or the 4.25 Doctors, really. And it sort of went on like that all the time, but I quite like that sort of situation. A lot of writers don't, but I quite like crises cropping up every 10 minutes and having to rewrite this and change that, Right at the very end, when I thought I was finished, and they'd accepted the last draft, and I thought, thank God, that's over. And then I got a phone call from Eric saying, I think there's a problem, Terrance. Eric is a good script editor, and he's very meticulous, very, very thorough. Every little detail he goes into. And he said, I'm worried about the last sequence where the Pertwee Doctor and Sarah Jane get to the tower. He said they get there too easily. They need to encounter one other big danger before then to sort of give that bit of the story a lift. And he said it's got to be sensational, terrifying, brilliant, and above all cheap. Because they spent all their money by then, you see. And eventually I came up with the Raston robot, which is basically it was a dancer, a black guy, very athletic sort of ballet dancer character in a silver suit, and then they did all these wonderful things with the weapons sizzling out. And the moving, so you move in a flash, which is very easy to do. You just lock off the camera, move it, and put it back on again. So, and I think that's the Raston robot's my favourite thing in the show. And it came out of last minute crisis and emergency, but it was very much that kind of show. Sometimes when you're desperately scrabbling to get through, and working at top rate, things somehow fall into place better, than something you might have more time and money for.
So,
right.
Can I just ask about the Five Doctors? Because on paper, it's like a car crash waiting to happen, really.
Yeah.
But it just worked perfectly.
Yes.
Was it,
well,
a rude question, perhaps. I hope you don't.
Yeah.
Was it a surprise to you that it just worked so beautifully?
No, not really. I have great faith in myself. And did you ever see Shakespeare in Love? Where somebody says in that, so he says it'll be all right. It's a theatre. It's magic. And that's what I felt. It was magic. It somehow or other it all came together and it works. God knows how or why, but it did.
Yes, it did. Yeah.
It's just as I say, sometimes your luck's in and everything works.
Did writing the Five Doctors give you any more confidence in writing the Eight Doctors book?
Well, that was a different operation, you see, because I knew I wasn't going to have any of the cast withdrawing, and the thing in the book there were no budgetary restrictions, and that was fun to do actually. At the beginning I got a lot off my chest about that the dreadful movie with Paul McGann in, which I always hated. I hated except for Paul McGann. What I said was they got one thing right, which was casting Paul McGann, you know. So I hope desperately that it will work, you see. Again, Barry and I got invited to the premiere of that, and then we went back to the sort of BBC party. And some BBC man, and you know, we hated it. I mean, Barry and I looked at each other and we could see, you know, Barry said his stomach churned all the way through, you know. And we went back afterwards, and some BBC Mandarin said to me, "Oh, Terrance, old chap, what did you think of it?" And I said, "It's incoherent crap." And he wasn't particularly pleased with this. And then I said to Barry, "Look, I think we better leave early, Barry, because I might say something tactless, you know." And we were both steaming, you know, and we just walked out of the whole thing because it was a shambles. It was a terrible, terrible shambles. So writing The Eight Doctors, I was able to get a bit off my chest in that. And also, you know, tie up a few knots and, you know, and plug a few plot holes and things like that. And that's sort of kind of like doing a jigsaw. It's a technical challenge, but it's fun to do if that kind of thing amuses you, and you hope amuses a few fans as well. That was the first book of when the BBC took over the novels, you know, which for years and years W.H. Allen had been asked for a renewal of their contract, and the BBC had said yes. Not very interested really, and one year they just said no. And we're going to do it, and you know, and they just stole the whole idea, lock, stock, and barrel, and carried on doing it for a while. Yep. Question.
Can I ask you how much you had to do with the development of the character of the Master, the original Master, Roger Delgado? And the other question, was it ever intended that the Master would have been a Doctor's brother? Or as I've heard elsewhere, another aspect of the Doctor?
Well, the development is a thing that Barry and I did between us. We liked at the beginning of each new season to have some sort of gimmick, you know, something that would lift that first story and make it a bit more exceptional, or be good for publicity or whatever. And in the BBC bar, where we did a great deal of conferring over several glasses of wine, I was saying, or we were both saying, that the Doctor has often been compared to Sherlock Holmes. You see, you know, in his arrogance and his loftiness and being brighter than everybody else. And I suddenly said, you know what he needs, Barry? He needs a Moriarty. We need a Professor Moriarty, you know. And another Time Lord of equal rank who's gone to the bad and who'll be kind of a worthy opponent. And instantly Barry said, and I know just the man to play him, Roger Delgado. So nobody, you know, that part was written for Roger. Nobody ever was even considered for one moment. Because Barry had been an actor for many years before he became a director and producer, and he worked a lot with Roger. Roger was always playing something like the Spanish ambassador, lurking in the shadows and stabbing people in the back, you know, and that kind of thing. That was Roger's part. And, you know, I think he was tremendous as a master, enormous sort of charm and charisma. And then we sort of said, what shall we call him, you see? And I went home and thought about it, and I was thinking, I've been reading C.P. Snow, you know, there's a book called The Masters. People fighting for the job of master of a Cambridge college, you see, which is like the senior post. And I said, well, let's call him the Master. So that, all the inception, you know, came from that, and we planned and wrote it for Roger. We did, you know, like a season, and everyone, the Master turned up, and the Master was behind everything. So we decided to make him, as it were, an occasional villain, you see, so we do other stories. Now, that was fine for us, but it wasn't very good for Roger, because he said to Barry, look, I'm going to have to leave finally, because, you know, people think I'm in Doctor Who all the time, and I'm only in it, you know, a part of the time. And he felt he was losing work. And Barry said, you know, do you want to be written out quietly, or do you want to go out with a bang? And Roger said, oh no, with a bang. So in the most early and tentative stage, we were throwing around ideas for a story in which the Doctor and the Master were engaged in some final conflict. but eventually have to join forces to save the universe, and somehow or other the Master gets killed. Perhaps, leaving it ambiguous as to whether or not he sacrificed himself to save the Doctor. He never quite has the heart to kill him, even when he's got the chance, does he? So, but all that, of course, was cut short by Roger's sad death on location, which was a great shock to all of us. And then, of course, he was gone for quite a while until Bob brought him back in The Deadly Assassin, not in very good shape, and then he was picked up afterwards by Anthony Ainley.